Hello, everyone. This is Bill Carroll of Team ABS Media and also of Zinni 62 Media. So you can find me both places. And, well, I'll be honest, this was a really interesting draft. Obviously, with some controversies, the biggest one being I can't avoid it, I guess. I have to talk about it, ShedeurSanders. I want to start actually with a different position group, but I'll have to mention that I think it was a combination of things with Shedeur, and I will address it more when I get to the quarterbacks. But I'm going to start with the wide receivers for two reasons. One is I heard a lot of bad stuff about the wide receiver group all throughout this pre-draft process, and it began to change a little bit as things went on. The combine helped, the Senior Bowl helped, and I just think people had to go back and reassess what they originally thought of this wide receiver group. But it's a good group. Tetroy McMillan, of course, went 8th overall to the Panthers. He is a big-bodied receiver with a big catch radius, enough speed, not quite Vincent Jackson, not quite that level of catch radius, but a really good catch radius. I think he's going to have a really solid NFL career. I think his, ceiling is a high one, right? His ceiling could be as high as a guy like Michael Pittman Jr. I think that living room area is Alshon Jeffrey. I think sort of a worst case scenario is like a Josh Reynolds kind of player. But I see him as a rookie, probably between 38 and 44 catches for a little over maybe 702 yards, somewhere in that range, 680 to 702 yards, 7 touchdowns. He's going to be really good in the red zone from day one. Like him a lot. Ibuka going to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers should be unfair. That should be. He is going to, right? The old Ezekiel Elliott meme of just shoveling as the older, more established receivers begin to tail off a little bit as they age. So his first year will probably be fairly productive, but watch out for him after that. Excuse me. I won't be surprised if he's the number one dynasty receiver, despite the fact that McMillan went ahead of him, because he'll only have to really compete soon with probably one other guy for catches. I think he starts out as the number 3, becomes the number 2, the eventually number 1 receiver down the road. And while Ibuka isn't super dynamic, he's not huge, he's not blazing fast, he's not special in the normal ways of a player being special, like being a physical freak or, having one special off the charts amazing quality. He is just boring. And I mean boring in a good way, right? He is boring in the sense of being able to find the right place in the field, run routes at the right depth and the right tempo, with the right amount of route deception. He's just good, like I said, in the most boring but effective way possible, right? So I'm a big fan, and he's in a really great situation. Other players that were drafted wide receiver who I really am excited about is also Mr. Luther Burden. Once again, a Illinois native, barely though, East St. Louis, dynamic, terrific after the catch, bigger, stronger version of a guy like Lockett, right? Sort of if Cooper Kupp and Tyler Lockett had a baby, boom, right? You have Luther Burden, just a really good all-around receiver. And I think he's headed for great things. And once again, in a really good situation. So that's a player that I think is going to blossom quickly. He might not be the number 1 dynasty receiver, but I won't be shocked if he's a guy who comes off the board really early in dynasty fantasy. And of course, in the real world, I think he's going to be really good also. He's just going to be plain old good, right? Just plain old good. He does, once again, the guy does almost everything well. And especially after the catch, he played with I think inconsistent quarterback play would be the nicest way I could put it. Subpar might be even more honest. And I know I jumped over Golden and Higgins. I'm going to come back to them next because I'm in the order of the guys I think will have the most rookie impact. I think Trey Harris, and then I'll go back to Golden and Higgins, has a chance to really do some work. Once again, I think he's a 3 initially, but I think he fights his way into the 2 position pretty quickly. Once again, over time, he may not have the immediate breakout that maybe McMillan or Ibuka have. I think Burton is. I think it's sort of that order in terms of. I think it's actually Ibuka maybe has the most rookie impact. McMillan, then Burton, Harris, and then I'll go back to the other 2. But in Burton, like you have this really dynamic guy. In Harris, you have this once again a bigger body, and while he's not huge like McMillan, doesn't have quite that kind of ability to just snatch balls from all over the place. He has for his size, he has good body control. He's a good enough, once again, good enough athlete, not a freak. But I think he's just going to be a really good wide receiver 3 initially. He turns to a wide receiver 2, probably by maybe before his rookie year's over, but certainly by his next year in the league. Now I'm going to hop back to Golden. I think Golden's a good player. I see him initially getting lost in the sauce, frankly, in Green Bay. 452 yards receiving, probably on a small number of catches, maybe 23 catches. I think he's going to have, big time yards per reception, but I don't think he's going to be able to be dominant right away just because they have a lot of good receivers in Green Bay. And then once again, they might move one of them. I'm hearing rumors they might try to move somebody, but I'm not going to assume that. And then Higgins goes to what looks to be a really good opportunity because they've got a lot of guys who, aren't there anymore or are injury prone. Nico Collins he's already a star to me, and he has a chance to go from being a star to a superstar. And if that happens, that actually helps Jaden Higgins because he'll start, he consistently drawing double teams. Higgins could be a 2 or a 3. We obviously have to see what happens with the long-term injury picture for their receiver core. But, they moved on from Diggs, or Diggs moved on from them, depending on how you want to see it. And obviously Tank Dell got hurt. So why do I not think Higgins is going to have the biggest immediate impact? I think it's 2 reasons. I think that he and Collins are kind of the same guy. They have to adjust to playing differently. Now, they might have him in the Z, or they might kick him in and try to get him to be a power slot. I do think he'll have a really solid rookie season. I think of the rookie receivers, I think he ends up having the 4th or 5th best season. And then moving on to Besh. I think Besh is essentially a tough guy, a possession receiver. Doesn't give you a whole lot besides being a tough guy who catches the ball well, has really good body control. He's going to fight for every catch. He's going to work at everything. He's going to be good and get better. But if you think he's going to turn into Cup or something like that, I don't think that's in the cards. But I do think he's going to have a solid rookie impact. I think he ends up in the top 10 amongst rookie receivers in terms of production, but I just think he's going to be towards the lower part of that top 10. Kyle Williams, I think, actually ends up outproducing him. Now he goes to the Raiders, and the Raiders are an interesting team. I think that he's the kind of guy that could eventually have a similar role to what Tyler Lockett had when he was with Geno in Seattle. Then that brings us to, and of course, I'll just stick with doing one more second. I think Drake Lee May is on the cusp of becoming a top 8 quarterback. I think we're talking about him in a couple of years as a top 5 quarterback, but next year I think he's talked about as a top 8. Then we come to the excitingly named Isaac Tesla with the capital S and 2 A's. Terrific tester, really good body control, and I guess the big thing for him is he's once again played with some very difficult, frankly, quarterback play at times. And so, whether it be previous years or this year, he's had to make some tough catches, and he makes them, right? He's all the things we said about Besh, but more athletic, right? A guy who has the ability to really adjust to badly thrown balls again, as I said with some of the other guys, can work the middle of the field, but also outside the numbers. And like I said, much better athlete than he looked like on tape. And I don't know if that's once again a function of the way he was using the offense that he was in Arkansas, or it's a function of the fact that he's just one of those guys that tests better than he plays in terms of athletic ability. And now we come to one of my favorites, but a guy who's just not going to probably ever put up big numbers as a receiver. But I think he becomes sort of I won't even a poor man's, a middle class man's Keon Coleman, and that is Pat Bryant, who is a very good blocker, first of all, very good blocker, and can once again attack. For a guy who's not very fast, 4.62, he can attack down the field because he is deceptive enough in terms of how he, hides his intentions and how he uses his route stems, things like that. He can still work down the field. But I think he ends up being a wide receiver 4 who develops in wide receiver 3, but really helps you in the run game because he's a really good blocker. And then we come to one of my favorites in Jalen Noel. He goes to the Texans. I will not be shocked if of the 2 Iowa State receivers, he's the one who actually has more yardage. He may not have more catches, but he may have more yardage. Maybe Higgins, because of size, maybe gets more touchdowns. We'll see. But I think Noel is one of the steals of the wide receiver group going at number 79. Big fan. Savion Williams, sure, Green Bay. Why not? Green Bay likes collecting receivers. And once again, they may try to move on from one of the guys that's already on the roster. But even if they don't, this is their guy who may become sort of like their Randall Cobb, sort of a hybrid player, has some toughness, has some size, good after the catch, but not a great route runner, and his hands are good, but not amazing. Ty Felton is another one of those upside picks, and he goes to the Vikings. So once again, he can start as a 4 who maybe develops into a 3. Obviously, Addison has become really one of the better young slot receivers, and you have, in Justin Jefferson, the best receiver in the league. So you should follow that guy around like a lost puppy and try to do everything he does. Now we come to one of the first and one of the few reaches I see amongst the wide receiver group, and that is Chimere DK. Really athletic, could really develop into something, but it never really happened for him in college. We would like to believe that maybe that's a result of the system he was in. Maybe it's a result of the quarterback play that, maybe wasn't always the best. But but there's reasons to be concerned about, what he might or might not ever be. Because frankly, I don't know if he's ever been more than just a guy that we talk about as being, a guy with a lot of potential. He came into high school, as a guy who was very came sort of new to the game, played multiple positions, even some defense, and finally settled in at receiver. I feel like he never is more than a wide receiver 4, maybe a wide receiver 3 ever. And I think he's initially probably a guy who's a special teamer and only on in maybe 4 wide receiver sets. Then we come to Arian Smith. Once again, when a guy sort of is I don't want to say a one-trick pony, but he's pigeonholed in college. He's not dominant in college. It's hard to find examples of guys who become a dominant force at the next level when they didn't really, do a tremendous amount of taking over games. But he is capable of having some really good catches. But I think he's in that, almost in that third tier in terms of production amongst the rookie wide receivers. And almost everything I said about both DK and Smith can be applied also to Thornton. Thornton is a legitimate deep threat, sort of a 1.5 maybe trick pony. He can also work the middle of the field a little bit, but he's a guy that definitely can get down the field and tracks the ball fairly well. Doesn't run really great deceptive routes and doesn't always fight through contact as well as you think a guy with that kind of build would. Then we come to Jalen Lane. I was pleasantly surprised that Lane went as early as he did. I liked him. I still think he's a 3 that maybe develops into a 2. But he is a guy who the Commanders can definitely use, and he'll be breathing down Noah Brown's neck pretty quickly. Now we come to my other big steal, to my mind, big steal. This is a guy that I thought could possibly go in the first 60 picks. Definitely thought would go in the first 75 picks. To go at pick 133 for Jalen Royals was a big surprise to me. Big surprise to me. I like him a lot. I think his ceiling is Brandon Ayuk. I think his floor is a guy like Jericho Cotchery, and I think somewhere in between is where he most likely ends up. What, other than his injury history, I'm a little bit perplexed about him still being on the board there, but he's going to be productive. He has a chance to be a wide receiver 3 out of the box with Kansas City, quite frankly. And they're going to throw the ball in Kansas City, right? That's not news to anybody. Rashee Rice is going to come back. They brought back Hollywood Brown. We'll see how it all works out. Like, there's still question marks about how they're going to figure out the workload in Kansas City, but I like him a great deal. And I'm going to write about it. So I'll be writing about Kansas City's draft, starting it tonight, hopefully be done by Monday, and you can catch it on Team MBS Media's website. Next is another of my favorite players of the later wide receivers. So Alec Amenor is not that different from Tetroy McMillan, frankly. He was in a worse situation because, Fafita and McMillan, have a connection that goes back to when they were something like 9 years old or something crazy, right? They played youth football together, 7-on-7 together, high school football together, college football together. Frankly, I'll be shocked if Fafita doesn't end up at least in camp, right, in Carolina. He's actually kind of like a very poor Polynesian man's version of Bryce. So yeah, I could see that. But getting back to Amenor, the worst game as a corner, at least the worst game as a corner that Travis Hunter ever had was against Amenor. And Amenor's not, once again, super deceptive. He's just big, strong, fast, and really good at the catch point. A guy who really does a great job of tracking and high pointing the ball, fights through contact. Probably a wide receiver 3. Starts out as maybe a 5 or a 4, but he'll be a really good wide receiver 3. And his ceiling, Marcus Colston, right? A ceiling is Marcus Colston. And now we come to Jordan Watkins. Athletic, right? Another really athletic guy, was never the guy. And so, like I've said with some of the other guys, it's rare that a guy who is sort of a second-tier player in college becomes a first-tier player in the NFL. I think he's always going to be a wide receiver 4, maybe 3. But there's things to like. Like I said, very athletic. If he really refines his route running, becomes more deceptive, if he really works on reading defenses on the fly and finding the right place on the field, he has a chance to be productive, but I don't think he'll ever be the guy because he hasn't shown the propensity for that. Then we have Keandre Lambert-Smith. Auburn's passing game of late has not been the most scintillating. So I'm going to try to be kind about some of the shortcomings I've seen. I think he's going to be an NFL wide receiver. I think he's going to be, once again, in that third tier of receivers. If everything works out, I could see him becoming, a 4, right? I don't think he'll even be a wide receiver 3, but there's something worth investigating there. He has a chance. And once again, the Chargers need somebody to emerge. I don't think it'll be him. Now we come to another guy I really, really like and was pleasantly surprised that he made it this far, and he goes to a team that I think will use him. I think he becomes a wide receiver 4 right out of the box. He could eventually become a wide receiver 3, and that's Seattle with Torrey Horton, another guy that actually had some success, though he wasn't matched up against him all the time, but had some success against Travis Hunter. Torrey Horton's another height, weight, speed guy, good at the catch point, could still improve in some areas, not a perfect prospect, but he goes to a good situation, an offense that I believe will want to throw the ball deep, and that's where he can make some early damage. And another guy, kind of the same player, right? Next is LaJohntay Webster. Webster is another guy that height. So if we take out Watkins and Lambert-Smith, now Amenor is the better version of the receiver that these guys all are, but Imanor, Horton, and West are all kind of the same type of guy. And I won't be shocked if one of them, maybe Imanor, eventually actually becomes a maybe a high end two or maybe even a lower end wide receiver one. The other two guys are probably more likely threes to low end twos. Then we come to Jimmy Horn. I think Jimmy Horn carves out a nice spot for himself as a wide receiver three. I think he starts out as a four. He's can do a little bit of everything. Good, not freakish, but good athlete. And I can tell he's going to work, right? He's a guy that wants it. I mean, they all want it, but I mean, he really wants it. Tez Johnson. There's a place for him on every team in the NFL. He went to the Buccaneers. Sort of unfortunate just because they have so much wide receiver depth on that team. I think he makes the team, but I think he's locked in as a 5 at first, and maybe he pushes his way up into a 4. Once again, unless they move somebody. And then Ricky White III. If he never plays a snap of wide receiver, he will have a place in the NFL because he's going to be a top tier special teamer. I think he has 4 career pump blocks in his career. He's just a terrific special teams player. And he's actually a better receiver than people realize. He just doesn't have speed, right? He's sort of a poor man's Keon Coleman. Not quite as refined, not quite as strong. And I think they were teammates. They were, right? They actually were teammates for a couple of years. Now I think of it at Michigan State before he transferred to UNLV. There's things to like there. He looked faster. So he plays a little faster than he timed. But not fast, but faster than he timed. Then we come to Caden Prather, the other Maryland wide receiver. Oh, did I jump over Felton? I might have jumped over Felton somehow. But of the 2 Maryland receivers, he's the more raw of the two. But Ty Felton, I did mention him. Yeah, he goes to a really interesting spot in Minnesota. So I did mention him. Good. I made sure I didn't miss him. But Prather also has talent. And once again, I think he never becomes more than a 3, but I think he'd be a high-end 3 one day. He probably starts as a 5, then he works his way up to 4, and I think he settles in eventually as could be a high-end 3. Kanata Mumfield. Now, the good news, he's gone to the Rams. The Rams are in the process of turning over their talent cycle. So he's going to initially be a 5 or a 4, but eventually a 3, and possibly becomes a 2 one day. I think more likely a 3, but it could happen for him. Dominic Lovett is a guy who I think is going to be a 4 and may never be above a 4, but could be a good one. Here's someone I'm excited about. Once again, if he never plays a snap of receiver, he still is a good selection because, once again, Junior Bergen might be pound for pound all around the best, like in terms of totality. As a return specialist, might be the best. He is a guy who can return kicks and punts, but also can play a receiver for you. Once again, I'm not going to go so far as to say Tyler Lockett. He's not quite there in terms of like explosiveness. He's fast, but he's not as strong. He doesn't have quite the build on him that a guy like Lockett did. It was like, always surprisingly strong. But watch this guy return kicks. I mean, just watch this guy return kicks. And I do think you'll see the field. Wide receiver 4 initially, or 5 initially, most likely, and then he eventually becomes a 4. May never get above the 4 level, but just his contributions on special teams will get him there. So that's it for the receivers that were drafted. I'm going to eventually break down some undrafted receivers as well in an upcoming stream I'm going to do probably Monday, once I know who pretty much most of those guys are. I'm going to do tight ends. I'm going in reverse order of alphabetical. I'm going to do tight ends maybe again tonight. If not, it'll be tomorrow. I'll work through most of the offensive skill positions between today and Monday, and then you'll see me do some breakdowns of the offensive line and running backs, and then I'll finish up at some point with quarterbacks. And there'll be lots to said about that. So please let me know what you think of it. Once again, Bill Carroll. Please check out my writing on Team MBS Media, and you can find on the artist formerly known as Twitter at Team MBS Live is the Twitter, and then Team MBS on Instagram, and of course the Team MBS YouTube channel where I do Draft Central with Jeff and Greg, and now Randall Cyphers joined us as well. And then, of course, Zenny62 Media, also on YouTube, and at Zenny62 Media on, once the artist formerly known as Twitter, now known as X. This is it for the drafted wide receivers. I'll be doing some other position groups later. See you again soon.